And just for variety's sake, I'm going to do something a little differently this time. With Uber, or at least our version of Uber, there's no actual need for a username and a password. We could consider it more or less a one-time use app. At least the rider will come along and access the app and then request an Uber and the driver will come and pick them up. There's no actual need for a username and password there. Obviously, in the real app, it is required for things like taking payments and remembering past locations, but to show you that you can have a social app using a cloud service without a login, I thought I'd show you how to do that here. So this is the login page that I'd like you to recreate or make something better. And we've got our Uber logo at the top there. Our rider and driver, this uses a switch to choose between rider and driver. And then when the user clicks get started, it at the moment just logs redirecting as driver or rider. It also uses the pass server anonymous login, which works in a very, very similar way to the login that we saw in the Instagram section. So I think you'll be able to figure that out. But if not, of course, just follow along with me. So best of luck. Off you go. Hope it goes well. Okay, as always, hope that went well. I'm going to begin by jumping over to Firefox and just quickly getting the Uber logo to work with. So just search for Uber logo. I'll go for that nice white one there. It's a reasonable size for us. Goes without saying that you shouldn't use the Uber logo in any real apps, but it's fine if you're just testing things out. So I'll call it Uber logo. And then we'll jump back over to Android Studio and create a new drawable directory. And then back over to Finder or Windows Explorer to find the logo that you've downloaded. Oops, it looks like it's lost the extension, so we'll just pop .png on the end there. And then Command or Control C to select it, over to Drawable, Command or Control V to paste it in. All right, now over to our main layout. And then we'll get rid of our text view and we'll build our layout. So I'll start from the top with our image view. And then as we're in 2.2, we'll automatically pop up with a resource search, and then we'll add Uber just like that. And again, I'll change the height 100 dps. Yeah, that looks great. Okay, then we'll bring in our switch to choose between a driver and a rider. And let's zoom in a little here. So I'm going to get rid of the text there, because I'm going to use two text views, because it's not exactly as if we're switching something on or off. We're just choosing between two options. So let's bring in a text view to the right there. And we'll just make sure it's nicely vertically centered. There we go. So this is going to be the driver option. And then we'll have another text view to the left. Again, let's drag it around. And this is going to be the rider option. Now, in order to get those perfectly aligned, it would likely be worth having a quick look at the XML And you can see here we've got a 12 pixel margin to the left of this one and a 14 pixel there. So if I update that to 14 on both sides, then we should be nice and symmetrical. Great. And then we just need a button to allow the user to get started. There we go. So we'll give this an on-click method of get started. And the only user interface element we're actually interested in is this switch here. So I'll call it a user type switch. There we go. All right, so that's our layout. Let's jump over to main activity. And we're going to want to be doing everything when that button is clicked. So we'll create a method called getStarted, which will be called by a view, i.e. the button, which we'll call view. And for now, before we do our test run, we'll just see if we can get the value of that switch. So let's create a switch variable, which will link to this switch. So we'll call it user type switch. And this is going to be a switch. We'll find it by its ID, r.id.user type switch. And for now, I'll just log switch value. And the switch value is going to be user type switch. And then we want is checked. And that's going to need to be converted to a string. So let's let Android Studio suggest that for us. And one other small thing, as I mentioned, I would like to hide the action bar to give this more of a full screen feel. So let's very quickly do that. It's actually very easy to do. All we do is get the support action bar and hide it. There we go. So let's have a look. We should now have this layout. So our switch in the middle and then our rider and driver nicely aligned either side of it, our get started button and our Uber logo. And there we go. So let's just check that currently the switch value is false. If we switch it on, it becomes true, etc. Brilliant. And you notice the action bar was hidden there. So we've got a nice full screen app. The only thing is, I think it's a little bit too dense. So I'm just going to stretch things out a bit. I'm not too worried about design in this course, but it's a little bit too scrunched up for my liking. So let's change this to 150 dp, so a bit of a bigger logo. And then let's move things down a little. So we'll change the margin tops here to 50. Driver and rider will leave the same, and then the margin top here we'll have as 50 as well. Maybe slightly too much. We'll make it 40 and 40. And we can live with that. Excellent. So now we need to do the work on pass to set up our user. As I mentioned, we're going to be using anonymous users this time. So let's start by checking to see whether or not the user's logged in. So we use pass user dot get current user. If that's null, then we'll try and log the user in. And we do this using pass anonymous utils. So utilities dot login. And this is going to have a login callback. And as it's anonymous, we're not sending any details. So we'll just do a check to see if E is null. Then we'll log info anonymous login successful. Else we'll log anonymous login failed. So let's just check that out. As it's an anonymous login, obviously we're not sending any details, and login is essentially the same as signing up as well. So we'll still be saving the user's details on our device until they log out. So we won't lose the information about whether they're a driver or a rider or whatever their latest ride is. But we just save the user the hassle of entering a username and password. So let's get the monitor up and running. And there we go. You can see anonymous login successful. And then let's just jump over to our data browser and refresh that. And we should now see a user there as well. It's also probably worth switching off automatic user here, because we are using anonymous user now, which is slightly different to automatic user. And I'll also get rid of that code saving the example object. We don't need that happening every time. Okay, there we go. So here's our user with their randomly generated username. Alright, so we're nearly done for this video. We just need to save the settings of whether the user is going to be a rider or a driver. So that will be stored when the Get Started button is pressed. So let's take our pass user, get the current user, and then put, and I'll call it rider or driver. And then we want to set it to a driver if the switch is true, i.e. to the right, and a rider if it's not. So let's set a string variable, user type to be rider by default, and then if user type switch dot is checked, then we'll change the user type to driver. And then here, then we'll just put the user type there. And then, of course, we're now ready to redirect to the next page of our app, which we don't have yet. So for now, I'll just log info redirecting as, and then we'll put the user type in there as well. And we do also just want to check down here if we do have a current user, if they've already set up whether they're a rider or a driver, we don't want to ask them again. So let's check to see if pass user dot get current user dot get, and then rider or driver if that's not null, i.e. if it's rider or driver, then we'll do the same thing. So info, and then redirecting as, and this time it's pass user dot get current user dot get rider or driver. So in the next video, one of the first things we'll do is create the new activity, and we'll redirect appropriately. So the riders will need to be directed to a different activity to the drivers. Okay, let's see that in action. And there we are. So I'll just bring up the log. So we logged in successfully. And then if we click that, we're redirecting as rider or redirecting as driver. Excellent. So that's as far as we're going to go in this video. We've got our login screen all set up. In the next video, we'll begin with the rider activity, which will essentially be a map showing the rider's location and giving them the option to call an Uber.